Hello everybody, RemDX here, and today I'm going to be going over a Magic the Gathering Commander deck. This is Jarad Golgari Lich Lord Commander. This is one of the cards that started me in Magic. I started around Return to Ravnica, and me and my brother got the Izzet versus Golgari decks. And he got the Izzets, I got the Golgari, obviously the better choice. Really got this card got me into Commander and has really kind of themed my play style, I guess. I like to sacrifice creatures. I like aristocrat style decks, and Jarad fits all of that. So if you don't know, let's get into Jarad. Jarad is a 4 mana green black for a 2/2 legendary creature zombie elf. Jarad Golgari Lich Lord gets +1/+1 for each creature in your graveyard. Here, let's go big. Anyway, 1/1 for each creature in your graveyard. You may pay black 1 and green. Sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. You can sacrifice a swamp and a forest to return Jarad from your graveyard to your hand. So, you don't normally have to pay commander tax. You pitch a couple lands. It gets big itself by the creatures in your graveyard. And the key part of this is we want to sacrifice creatures to its effect to kill our opponents. So we got basically your basic elf package. Birds of Paradise, Elves of Deep Shadow, Elvish Mystic, Finhorn Elves. Let's try this. There we go. Make it a little bigger. Finhorn Elves, Land of War Elves, but then we got a couple other like utility cards like Caustic Caterpillar, 1 green for a 1/1 that says pay 2 mana, sack it, destroy target artifact or enchantment. We got Crypt Breaker here, pay black and 1, tap, discard a card, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield, tap 3 untapped zombies you control to draw a card and lose 1 life. Now there are some zombies in here, not many, but there are a few, Jarad being one of them. So we can make usage of this draw effect. But primarily this is here to discard the cards we don't want to keep in our hand, like Hogak and a couple other cards. And that we would rather have in the graveyard, basically. Stitcher Supplier, this is here to mill us. When it enters or when it dies, you mill 3 cards. Bloom Tender, now they're up to 2 mana. Just makes a bunch of mana for you. Boneyard Worm, its power and toughness is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So as your graveyard gets bigger and bigger, this does more and more damage when you sacrifice it to Jarad. That's kind of going to be the biggest theme of the deck there. Fiend Artisan, it gets 1/1 for each creature card in your graveyard, so this can also be sacrificed. It has a base power 1/1, but it also has a Birthing Pot effect, kind of. Pay X and a hybrid green-black, tap it, sacrifice another creature, search your library for a creature with converted mana cost X or less, put it into the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only time you could cast a sorcery. So it just allows you to tutor creatures out of your deck that are relevant. Hermit Druid, pay a green, tap it, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a basic land card, put that card into your hand, throw the rest into your graveyard. All other cards revealed to your graveyard. This is one of the key ways you're going to mill yourself. Now, in this list, I kind of got a little lazy, and I didn't flesh out the mana base. There's a lot more basic lands in here, but generally you run few basic lands. So just know the more non-basic lands you run, the better and better this card gets. Sometimes this card can be tap it, mill 20, 30 cards. People build their decks with no basic lands in like competitive structures and just mill their entire deck out with this. It is an option in here. Our mana base is not set up that way currently, but feel free to do so. Also, gauge by your friends group. If you don't want to spike too hard, put a couple extra basics in so you don't mill so much. Incubation Druid, just another mana dork. This is actually just kind of a pet card of mine. It's an 0/2 that if you get any counter on it for any reason, it taps for 3 mana. It is quite good. I don't think we have any ways in this deck to actually just get a counter on it other than adapting it. But sometimes you just hold up interaction and they don't do anything, so you adapt it. And the next turn you go in with 2 extra mana. So it's quite good. You can also tap it to produce some of the 1 mana to activate it. So if you don't have it tapped, you can also do that. You can also block with it, tap it for mana, and then pay 4 other mana to adapt it to make it a 3/5, which is kind of a neat trick. Crawl Harpooner, 2 mana, reach, undergrowth. When it enters the battlefield, choose up to 1 target creature with flying you do not control. Crawl Harpooner gets +X/+O until the end of the turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. You may have it fight that creature. So often you don't actually want to fight a creature because you'll die. Because it is a fight, not a damage it. It's a fight. But if you have this enter and it gains +8, you just sack it and do 11 damage for 5 mana to everyone. Good card overall. Lotleth Troll, 2 mana, trample for 2/1 zombie troll. Discard a creature card, put a 1/1 counter on Lotleth Troll, pay a black to regenerate it. Another pet card of mine. It's really good at discarding some of these creatures that if you don't want them in your hand at the time. Or it can just kind of get big itself and threaten your opponent because it has regenerate and it has trample, so you can get in some combat damage with it relatively easily. Sakura Tribe Elder, just a land ramp you, plus it's a creature in the graveyard for your card effects. Satyr Wayfinder enters, you reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a land from among them in your hand, the rest to the graveyard, so again, filling the graveyard, getting you lands. Eternal Witness, just to get things back from the graveyard. Plaguecrafter, 3 mana, 3/2, enters the battlefield. Each player sacrifices a creature or a planeswalker. Each player who cannot discards a card. So that's good. This kind of helps you just keep your opponents down a little bit. Gets rid of planeswalkers sometimes if they don't have creatures. And if they don't have either, they start discarding cards. This is generally just the best version of this effect that a creature has. There's a couple other cards that do this, but I'm only including the one. If your play group is cool with it, you can include more. They're a great effect to have. Remnant Excavator, this just gets us lands back from the graveyard, 1 per turn. It is your land play for the turn, so 1 per turn unless you have someone that allows you to play more. This deck does not include that. Reclamation Sage enters, destroys artifact or enchantment for 2/1 for 3. Just solid utility card. Rotting Regisaur, 3 mana for a 7/6. At the beginning of your upkeep, you must discard a card. So it fills the graveyard, plus it's just a big body that you can just swing in there, start removing your opponent's creatures, getting damage in, filling your graveyard, all the things you want to do. Splinter Fright, 3 mana for a star elemental trample. Power and toughness equal to the number of creatures in your graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. So this mills you, gets bigger, has trample. Exactly what we want. Great thing to sacrifice as well because it gets large. Spring Bloom Druid. This is a 3 mana 1/1. Enters the battlefield, sacrifice a land. If you do so, you may search your library for 2 basic land cards, put them in the battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library. Puts a land in the graveyard, which is kind of relevant in this deck. Also fetches you more lands, plus it's on a body that we can sacrifice or block with. Also just increases our creature count in the graveyard. This is part of where the lands in the graveyard matters. Titania, Voice of Gaia. Reach, whenever 1 or more lands is put into your graveyard from anywhere, you gain 2 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 4 or more land cards in your graveyard, and you own both it and the land, which I'll get to, you exile it and return them melded together. Meld is normally an awful mechanic. I feel like this card specifically does it well, because it does its thing as soon as it comes together, and I will scroll down to that now. Sorry, you hear my mouse. So this is the meld. Titania, Gaia Incarnate. Vigilance, Reach, Trample, Haste. Power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. When it enters the battlefield, return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. That's pretty big. And put 4 1/1 counter, or pay 4, put 4 1/1 counters on target land you control. It becomes a 0/0 elemental. It is still a land. That part we never really use. For this, we mainly try to get them to flip together, get all your lands back, and then it has a large power toughness. This thing is regularly 8 to 12 pretty easily if you're milling yourself pretty good. Yeah, it does work. It does get a little awkward if you end up milling the land part of this, or if you mill Titania, but you can recur Titania, and you do have Ramanop Excavator to get it back from your graveyard, plus there's Life of the Loam to get the land back from the graveyard, so you have options. But yeah, this becomes pretty big, pretty quick, and it does have haste as well and vigilance, so feel free to play this, make it a 10-10 or whatever, swing it into someone with no repercussions, hold it up, it blocks flyers for you, and then you can sacrifice it to end people. Good card. This is just a considering card we'll get to later. Alright, where were we? Alright. Rog, Spawn of Throg. Black, green for a star 5 Frog Beast. Power is equal to the number of lands in your graveyard, so this is kind of opposite of her. It's a little bit of a non-synergy, but this card does do work. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. Pay 2, sacrifice a land, gain 2 life. They do kind of work together because you sacrifice lands, puts them in the graveyard for Voice of Gaia, but then his power goes down when you return all the lands. So a little bit of a non-bow, but also just a really good card. Because if you aren't going with the Titania plan, say you milled both pieces and you don't have a way to get them back, this guy can just get pretty large and you can just end up sacrificing him instead. Now this next card is kind of underrated, but it's really good. Wall of Blood. 3 mana for an 0/3. Pay 1 life, Wall of Blood gets +1/+1 until the end of the turn. This card says, for 6 mana, if your life is the highest life total in the game, you win the game. If everyone is at 39 life, because you sacrificed 1 elf, and you're at 40, you can sacrifice 39 life to make this a 39-41, and then sacrifice it to Jarad to do 39 damage to everyone. So you're at 1 life, everyone else is dead. Kind of no-brainer. Real good card, though. This next card is kind of one that I was thinking about cutting. It might just be too slow for what we're trying to do, but if the game goes out, this card does do a lot of work. It's a 4 mana, Kaga, I think? Shadow Archdruid. Legendary creature, Elf Druid, 1/4. Whenever it attacks, it gains Death Touch until the end of the turn, mill 2 cards. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land or cast a permanent spell from among cards in your graveyard that were put there from your library this turn. So it doesn't say with her effect, it says this turn. If you mill a bunch of cards with Hermit Druid, and you mill your Titania, and you have the land already in play, you don't even have to attack. You can just play the Titania from your graveyard with this because it was milled. It's just once per turn you may play a creature or a land. And it does do work. It's a little slower though. And maybe it's just the mill that's too slow for me. It's only mill 2. If this was mill 5 or 6, I think this card would be really good. But it's currently only really good if you have something else milling you. Mortivore. Black 2, star power. Power and toughness equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards, not just yours, all graveyards. Pay a black to regenerate it. So this card gets big, you sacrifice it. It's also a resilient threat because you can hold up black mana. So it's a solid body on the board state if they start killing like your Jarad a bunch, but then you start sacking lands to get Jarad back. So yeah, just overall a really good card. Ravenous Chupacabra. 2/2, enters the battlefield, destroy target creature and opponent controls. Solid removal spell on a body. World Shaper, 4 mana. When it attacks, you may put the top 3 cards of your library to the graveyard. When it dies, put all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it's just kind of another version of Titania. It doesn't get big like Titania does, but it does mill us a bunch, get us a bunch of lands. We do generally want a bunch of mana, so it's a good thing to have. This card could be a reasonable cut if you find yourself not needing it. Angel of Suffering. This is a card I didn't know existed until I started looking at things. It is a 5 mana black and 3 Nightmare Angel 5/3 with flying. If a creature would deal damage to you, prevent that damage and mill twice that many cards. So someone's going to do 4 damage to you. You prevent the 4 damage, and you mill 8 cards. Solid mill card, plus it's a 5/3 flyer that can get damage in. Like I said, it's pretty easy to just want to get your life total to the highest in the game so that you can use Wall of Blood. And this card enables that very easily. Death Bloom Ritualist. This is just a mana dork. 5 mana for 3/5. Tap, add X mana of any color, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. This can add a bunch of mana. This is strictly for those turns where you're going to sacrifice a lot of things to Jarad. You have options to do that. There's a few ways to do it. You just start building up your beefy walls where no one can hit you, and then you start milling yourself a bunch. Then all of a sudden this makes 7, 8 mana, and it pays for 2, maybe 3 Jarad activations. So, real good, but also could be a cut because it is on the slower side of things. So, Genesis, 5 mana, green and 4. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Genesis is in your graveyard, you may pay 3, a green and 2. If you do, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. It is a base power 4/4. This card's really good. It's just a card that you benefit from being in your graveyard. You can play it and sacrifice it, but it's only 4 damage, and you use 8 mana to do that, so it's not generally worth it. But if you mill it to your graveyard, you pay 3, you just start getting it back, getting cards back. There's a lot of cards on here that if you can sacrifice them multiple times, you will just end the game. Kessage Cage Breakers, 5 mana, 3/4. When it attacks, create a 2/2 wolf creature token that is tapped into attacking for each creature in your graveyard. So this just makes wolves solid walls for you. Gets in damage because just any bit you can do to reduce your opponent's life total makes the sacrificing that much easier. This card will probably get destroyed once you swing it in, but if it makes 10 wolves, you're totally cool with that because that's also 20 power there that you can sacrifice. Lord of Extinction, probably the all-star of the deck. 5 mana, 3 black-green. Lord of Extinction's power and toughness are equal to the number of all cards in all graveyards. Doesn't care if they're creatures, doesn't care what they are. Lands, enchantments, doesn't matter. And it's all graveyards, not just yours. This is the big bad to sacrifice. If you are milling yourself, your opponents, anything, this card is going to get the biggest, the easiest. It is going to do the most. Alright, Seedborn Muse. Untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. 5 mana, green 3 for 2/4. This just sits there to untap your stuff, so you can start getting aggressive with Jarad because he gets big. You can get your mana back to start sacrificing things, so you can just tap out to play all your cards, and then in the backswing, sacrifice everything on the opponent's turn just to squeeze out that extra damage. Card does work. This was not in the initial draft of the deck. I just thought it was too good to keep out. I could see running other things over this. Now, by no means is this the default best list for this deck. There's tons of cards that I'm not playing that could be better. This is just the list that I am currently playing, and I think all these cards synergize quite well together and make for quite a fun deck. You could be playing Demonic Tutors, Vampiric Tutors, Mana Crypts, all kinds of things. You can make this deck a lot stronger, but this is a relatively decent budget deck and does work. I know down here it says it's $289, but if you go up here to bulk, not bulk edit, wrong thing. Buy deck, if you go to TCG Player, it says it's $191. So plug for TCG. The deck's under $200, and it's a super cool deck. And I already have pretty much all of it. So, yeah, a lot of these cards also came in decks of sorts. So the cards generally are not too expensive to get. And a lot of these have cards you could substitute them with. Like instead of Seedborn Muse, you could be doing the enchantment. 4 mana, untap all your lands during your end step. Wilderless Reclamation, I believe? Yeah. But Seedborn Muse is just better. Okay, Sarah Conrad, the Grim. 5 mana, black 3 for 5/3. legendary creature, Human Knight. Whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature leaves the graveyard, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this says if a creature dies, you do damage. If a creature goes to your graveyard, you do a damage. If a creature leaves your graveyard, you do a damage. So it just, at any point creatures hit your bin or leave your bin for a resurrection or whatever, or they exile certain pieces that are important, you punish them for it. It also says pay 2, each player mills a card. Not generally the relevant text here, but it is probably like the strongest Blood Artist effect that we can be running. You could just be running Blood Artist, but we want to reanimate some dudes too. And if we sacrifice lands to get Jarad back to our hand, that also counts because he leaves your graveyard. So, alright, Underrealm Lich. If you would draw a card, instead look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put 1 into your hand, the rest to your graveyard, pay for life. Underrealm Lich gains indestructible until the end of the turn, and tap it. So the most comparable thing is Sylvan Library. That's what most people think of. Now, you don't get the options of all 3 cards, actually, so it's definitely a nerfed version. It's kind of like a fixed version, but this card is very good. You do just start putting cards into your graveyard, which feeds everything you want to do. You get your choice to your hand. Your opponent doesn't get to know what it is. It protects itself by just paying some life. There's a 4/3 body. Super relevant creature. Honestly, puts in a lot of work. Yargle and Multani. Woo! Vanilla creature. It's a 6 mana, black, green, and 3 for an 18/6. No abilities. But this is just 9 mana. Everyone takes 18. But me. It's each opponent loses life. So, it's a lot of damage. That's why it's there. There's a lot of guaranteed damage. If people wipe your graveyard, this card does not care. It is 18 damage. Hogak, Horizon Necropolis. It is 7 mana, 5 hybrid green black, legendary creature avatar, 8/8. You cannot spend mana to cast this spell. It has Convoke and Delve. You may cast it from your graveyard, and it has Trample. So you don't normally want to Delve this. I'll let you know that much. You normally want to just Convoke as much of this as you can out. And it does get a little awkward because you don't normally shell out that many creatures. But you can Delve it. Just try to keep as many creatures in your graveyard. This card is a little bit of a trap. And I was thinking about not even playing it. But the 8/8 body, if it gets to stick and you get a little bit of trample damage through, plus you get to sacrifice it, it does put in work. But it is a little bit of a trap if you're delving a lot. So be careful with your delving, okay? Ghoul Tree. This is 8 mana, 7 and 1 green. Ghoul Tree costs 1 less for each creature card in your graveyard. And it is power 10/10. Big creature. Big tree. I have paid 1 green mana for a 10/10. How does that sound? 1 green for a 10/10? Yeah. And then you can sacrifice that to draw to do 10 damage to everyone? Yeah. Yeah, we put in work here. Just a pretty solid creature. Molder Hulk, 7 green black, undergrowth, costs 1 less for each creature card in your graveyard, enters the battlefield, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Kind of helps with the graveyard land theme, creature in the graveyard theme. It's a 6/6, doesn't have trample, which I really wish it did, but it does work. It's a relatively large body, it gets you lands back. It can be pretty cheap, it can be 2 mana. It's not even hard to do, really. Alright, so that's the creature base. That was 43 cards, but 44 counting the commander. So, there's most of the deck gone. Life of the Loam. Green 1 for a sorcery. Return up to 3 lane cards from your graveyard to your hand, and dredge 3. Dredge says if you would draw a card, instead, you may mill 3 cards and return this card to your hand instead. This kind of goes with the land from the graveyard deck. It is a mill function. I debate this spot with Golgari Grave Troll. The troll mills 6, and it's a creature, which we do care about. But this really helps with the land theme. So you could optionally just completely cut the land from the graveyard theme. Maybe you keep Ramen Up Excavator just for the value of getting the lands from your graveyard. But You could go that route and then get rid of this and do Golgari Grave Troll, or you might just get Golgari Grave Troll in the deck with it. Milling 6 is definitely a better effect, but it is what it is. Yeah, good card. Victimize. Choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. Sacrifice a creature. If you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. So this returns not 1, but 2 creatures. It is at the cost of sacrificing 1 creature, but that is not generally too big of a cost for us. We generally can sacrifice even Jarad. If we sacrifice Jarad to get 2 big creatures back, then we sacrifice 2 lands to get Jarad back, we're kind of set. So, Dread Return, black 2 for sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Flashback, sacrifice 3 creatures to cast it from the graveyard. So this is just another way to get creatures back. And yeah, sacrificing 3 creatures to the effect to get a flashback on it is also really good. Getting back the Lord of Extinction specifically is really good with this, because you sacrifice Lord of Extinction the first time, say it does 8 damage, and then you sacrifice 3 creatures to get it back, so now you're 3 creatures larger, so you're now sacrificing for 11 damage, so it did 19 damage, which is half everyone's life. Alright, Spider Spawning, 5 mana, create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach for each creature in your graveyard. This can easily get pretty big. It also has flashback for 7, black, and 6. Yeah, just like a good wall card. Also provides tokens that you can sacrifice to other effects, like the Dread Return, the Victimize, stuff like that. Overall, does real good. Alright, Song of the Damned. This is not a card I even knew about until I started looking at Jarad list. 1 black for a instant, or interrupt as this says. Add 1 black to your mana pool for each creature card in your graveyard. It's honestly too good of a ritual for us not to play. You do 1 black, you make 6, 7 black mana, and then all you have to do is feed the green mana into Jarad, and you're set for a couple sacrifices. So, this deck is generally about building up a couple sacrifices and then just chaining them to kill everyone. So, this next card's kind of weird, but it actually does a lot of work. Supernatural Stamina. Until the end of turn, target creature gets 2/0 and gains when this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So, say that 8/8 Lord of Extinction's in play. You use this to give it +2, so it's now 10 power. You sacrifice it to do 10 damage to everyone, and then it immediately returns tapped, where you can sacrifice it again for another 8 damage. Now, it will lose the 2 power when it re-enters, but it doesn't matter. It's an extra free sacrifice. Not free, but it's an extra sacrifice. Abrupt Decay, just too good of removal for us not to play. Can't be countered. Destroy target non-land permanent with converted mana cost of 3 or less. Assassin's Trophy, destroy target permanent. Doesn't care, but then they get a land. Golgari Charm, all creatures get -1/-1 until the end of the turn. Destroy target enchantment or regenerate each creature you control. So this is my anti-board wipe card. This gets rid of little things. It can get rid of problematic enchantments. It's really just a really good toolbox card. It does pretty much everything you want it to do. Skull Clamp. Ooh, now this is how we start drawing cards. Equip your creature gets +1, -1, and whenever it dies, you draw 2 cards. 1 mana, 1 to equip. So, you just start drawing cards with this. It does make your creatures 1 bigger, which is not terribly relevant, but it does matter. But the drawing cards is what this is here for. Soul Ring, obviously. Altar of Dementia, sacrifice a creature. Target player puts cards, mills cards equal to its power. 2 mana. Arcane Signet, just mana. Golgari Signet, just mana. Mesmeric Orb. Whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. So this puts in a lot of work because it is one of the key ways you'll mill yourself and opponents. Remember, some of your cards do care about how many creatures are in your opponent's graveyards as well. It's not our main theme. Our main theme is us. We care about us, not what other people are doing. Bone Horde. 4 mana for a living weapon equipment. 2 to equip. Equip your creature gets +X, where X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards. So this is often you play it, you sacrifice the germ for however much damage, and then you equip this to an elf. And then you sacrifice your elf, and it did that much more damage. And then you equip it to something else, and then it does that much more damage. Overall, this is a good card. It is just a 4-mana version of the same effect, but this can turn any of your redundant cards, like Satyr Wayfinder, Elves, just all your cheap early interaction stuff that you're trying to do. It turns them into an actual sacrifice threat. Helm of the Host. This card is too good for its own good. It is 4 mana for legendary artifact equipment with 5 to equip. Now that's a steep cost. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that is a copy of equipped creature, except the token is not legendary if the equipped creature is legendary. That token gains haste. The tokens don't go away. They stay. You can make tokens of all your big dummies, including Jarad, and start sacrificing them to other things. To Jarad. So Jarad's a 6/6. So you equip it to Jarad, you swing Jarad, you make a token which is swinging, and then you can sacrifice one of them. It doesn't even matter which one. If they go to block, say, the real Jarad, you sacrifice it to the other Jarad. And sure, you'll have to re-equip, but it doesn't matter. You got 6 damage in, plus they didn't block the other one, so they took 12, So it does a lot of work. And that's just a weak Jarad. That's only a 6/6. He gets a lot bigger than that. Alright, Enchantments. Kaya's Ghost Form. 1 black. Enchant creature or planeswalker you control. When enchanted creature dies or is put into exile, return that card to the battlefield under your control. So this is exile protection for 1. This is also an extra sacrifice. Same thing. Put it on Lord of Extinction. Sacrifice Lord of Extinction. Lord of Extinction comes back, and it's a free sacrifice. Well, not free, but another sacrifice. Animate Dead. This just animates a creature from your graveyard. It just gets you something back. Just a reanimate spell. Greater Good. Sacrifice a creature. Draw cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power. Then discard 3 cards. This card is quite good. We can get a lot of card value off this. Also, discarding 3 cards can be very beneficial for this deck. So, puts in the work. Pattern of Rebirth. Enchant creature, 4 mana, green and 3. Whenever enchanted creature dies, that creature's controller may search the library for a creature card, then put that card on the battlefield and shelf out their library. Any creature card you want. So, Lord of Extinction, Sir Conrad, other key pieces, Titania, if you think that she's going to be better. Yeah. You got options. Unnatural Growth. Now, this is a card I never would have even thought of until I was looking at a list. I knew this card existed, but it's not one I was going to play. So it is 5 mana, 4 green, and a 1 generic. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until the end of the turn. So that Lord of Extinction, that's an 8/8, you go to combat, and it becomes a 16/16. That's till the end of the turn. So during second main phase, you can sacrifice it as a 16/16. And it will do 16 damage. So, also, you just get to bash creatures in during combat. You just get to swing them out with little fear. Alright, now for the super basic mana base I have set up. You can disagree with any of this you want. I put just kind of some of the important ones, or some of the better ones, I think. I'm running way less basics in this deck than this. I just kind of got lazy. Argonath Sanctum. This is the card you need to meld with Titania. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary green creature. Jarad is a green creature. It is green and black, but it is green. So, but that you don't generally care about too much. It does make green mana, or you can pay 4, tap it, make a 2/2 bear creature token, and mill 3 cards. Hey, mill on our lands. That's really good. Command Tower, Dockmore Salvage. It says Dredge 2. The pathway just kind of fixes for whatever color you want. This is just a fast land. If you have 2 or less. When it enters, it enters tapped unless you have 2 or fewer lands. Or 2 or more lands. So yeah. Llanowar Waste, Mosswort Bridge, Hideaway Land. 10 power is not hard for us to get. This card, a lot of people do cut this card, and I totally get it. It does enter tapped every time. But it does kind of just 1 green mana gets you a good card often. So, well, I guess 2 because you tap it as well. But Overgrown Tomb, Rogue's Passage. Do not underrate this card. A lot of people cut these from those decks, and in a lot of cases, they're right. In this deck, you're not. 4 mana, make something unblockable, swing it in. Yeah, we get big and dumb here, okay? This card does work. Swamps, Stadium, cares about how many opponents you have. Witch's Cottage, land, it is a swamp. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more other swamps. Enters the battlefield. If it enters the battlefield untapped, you may put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. So this is not a reanimate, but it does allow you to get it the following turn. It is slower, but it does do good work. But it does have to enter untapped to get that secondary effect. So make sure when you do start cutting basic lands, you leave a good chunk of swamps. Also, Jarad specifically cares about forest and swamp. So you can't cut too hard on them, okay? And then Woodland Cemetery. So overall, I think it's a pretty good list. It's just about under $200 value. And that's with some of the prettier arts too. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Like I said, Jarad was an old favorite of mine. Got me into Golgari, which then got me into Sultai. And I branched out from there and learned all kinds of different things. But man, nothing quite hits those heartstrings for me like a good Edict deck. Good sacrifice theme deck. Let me know what you think should be in the list, what I should cut. Overall, I think it's quite a solid list. Go ahead and give it a shot yourselves. If you do try it, let me know. I'd really appreciate to hear how it went for you. All right, this was Remedy X with all things nerdy. I hope you enjoyed. Bye.